This man was truly terribly unlucky. Today was supposed to be the day he was released from prison. Just because he was so eager to see his wife and daughter, he boarded a plane transporting dangerous criminals, hoping to get home early to celebrate his daughter's birthday. But calamity struck just as the plane was about to take off, when a group of criminals began their escape plan. And this man's misfortunes weren't limited to just this one time. Let's rewind to when the story began, 8 years ago. He was a discharged veteran, heading towards a happy life. But on a stormy, rainy night, a few thugs came to cause trouble and even insulted his wife. He didn't want to cause trouble, but his instincts kicked in. Having been a member of a special forces team, he took down the thugs with just a few moves and delivered a decisive blow to the ringleader. Unfortunately, the ringleader died. Disaster befell him. But the calamities didn't stop there. His lawyer advised him to plead guilty, stating that a guilty plea could reduce his sentence. 8 years could be cut down to 4 years, maybe even just 1 year in prison. Initially, he refused, but for the sake of his wife and unborn daughter, he admitted to manslaughter. However, in the final verdict, due to his military training, different sentencing standards applied to him than to ordinary people. Because his ability to resist could be fatal, his sentence was not less than 7 to 10 years. And just like that, the man had to go to prison. Day by day, year after year, his wife and daughter became his motivation to live on. He watched his daughter grow up through the photos plastered all over his cell wall. Even living in prison, he still felt like the happiest man in the world. Later, when his daughter started school, writing letters to her became a part of his life. In a flash, 8 years passed, and the man was granted parole. The day he left prison was also his daughter's birthday. To quickly reunite with his wife and child, he boarded a plane. This plane was tasked with transporting several dangerous criminals to a prison in Alabama. The superiors took this very seriously because this flight gathered many bad guys. William Bedford, nicknamed Billy Bedlam, Nathan Jones, a former black guerrilla leader who had bombed the National Association. He had written a book in prison called A Dog's Eye View of Humanity, and his story was about to be made into a film. Cyrus Grissom, this guy with countless crimes: kidnapping, robbery, murder. At 39, he had already served 25 years in prison. In prison, he was very diligent, earning 2 university degrees, including a law degree. He had killed 11 fellow inmates and caused 3 riots and escaped twice. On such a plane, our protagonist, Cameron Poe, insisted on choosing this flight because he wanted to get home quickly. Even before the plane took off, the agents were still worried. There were too many bad guys on the same plane, and they hoped nothing would happen. But while the plane was taxiing, the prisoners began their operation. A calloused, thick hand managed to pull out a bobby pin. The ringleaders gradually untied themselves. Pinball looked disgusting. He vomited out a string from his throat, then pulled out about half a meter, which turned out to be a small plastic bottle. Pinball held the bottle tightly in his hand. The boss in the cage nodded. "My Native American friend, if you don't die, don't curse me." A strange liquid was sprayed onto the prisoner's face, then a match was lit, and fire erupted on the plane. The guards quickly acted. The big man grabbed the fire extinguisher. The female officer grabbed Pinball and ran to make a phone call. At that moment, Pinball quickly grabbed the female officer's key and rushed to open the prisoner's cage. Nathan rushed out, utterly inhuman, and knocked the female officer down. The big man turned back and managed to subdue him, but it was all too late. This was a prearranged plan. At this point, Cyrus had also escaped. He immediately entered the cockpit, subduing the co-pilot who was rushing out. The co-pilot was killed right there. Next, Cyrus took control of the plane. He fired a warning shot into the air. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am your captain. Welcome to the Sky Prison." Witnessing this scene, Cameron was utterly heartbroken. Tears of regret streamed down his face. All the criminals were uncuffed. Now, the ones in handcuffs were the guards. Johnny couldn't hold back any longer. Just by looking at his face, you could tell he was eager. At that moment, Cameron stood up and stopped him. "You can't do that now." Johnny was about to continue his action when the boss appeared. "That's right. He's right. You can't do that now. Can you fly a plane, Johnny? You need to remember clearly. If you dare touch her, I'll throw you off the plane." No matter how cold-blooded they were, there was someone they feared. They all had to rely on Cyrus. From the guard's mouth, they learned that the next stop was Carson City. 6 prisoners would get off the plane, and 10 others would replace them. They intended to get off the plane normally, because if they wanted true freedom, they had to plan their escape route. And all of this was paid for by someone, a drug lord. As long as his son was rescued, these guys would be able to go abroad and enjoy themselves. While unbuckling the leg irons, the undercover officer acted. He subdued Pinball, ordering Cyrus to drop his weapon. Cameron advised him that he was acting too rashly. If he dropped his gun, he would become a hostage. They wouldn't kill innocent people for now. But the undercover officer was still too naive. He didn't wait for the right moment and, unfortunately, lost his life there. "What's your name, my friend?" "My name? Yes, my last name is Poe." "Well done." Only his fellow prisoners knew he wanted to save the undercover officer's life, but he was swept into Cyrus's vortex. Pinball discovered a problem in Carson City. Among the prisoners who were supposed to get off the plane, 2 had been shot dead. So, they had to find replacements. This was a great opportunity, but Cameron didn't want to miss the chance to save people. Of course, as prisoners, no one wanted to volunteer. Under the constant persuasion of their fellow prisoners, they agreed. "Wait, they want white people. Consider yourself unlucky." The friend was very worried. After getting off the plane, he would surely die. Cameron assured him that after getting off the plane, he would scream bloody murder so the plane couldn't take off. To prevent the screaming, Cyrus gagged them. Cameron's plan failed. He raised his head. "I want to stay. I've changed my mind. I have 15 years left. I don't want to miss the opportunity to enjoy myself." Due to his previous performance, Cyrus decided to trust him and found a white officer to replace his friend. He didn't want to abandon the tied-up female officer. On the dead undercover officer's body, Cameron found the audio tape. It recorded everything that had happened on the plane. At the same time, in the cell where Cyrus was held, the guards discovered a problem. Behind the wall, they found a map of the plane and a series of other documents. The plane landed in Carson City. Outside, blinding dust swirled, and all the guards revealed only their eyes. Cameron took the opportunity to slip the audio tape onto the prisoner who was getting off. Cyrus, wearing a coat, led 6 prisoners off the plane, all of them hooded. Among the prisoners brought on board were the plane pilot and the drug lord's son. The prisoners didn't understand what was happening on the plane. There were no more guards, as if they had arrived at a different prison. All the newcomers were ecstatic. They dismantled the transponder on the plane. Pinball was in charge of handling the transponder. He stepped off the plane. He was very cunning, attaching the transponder to a tourist plane. The last prisoner brought on board was a temporary arrangement. When he learned this prisoner's name, Cyrus was astonished. This person was escorted separately. His physique wasn't very robust, but he was tightly bound with iron chains all over his body. All the hardened criminals were amazed. "He's Garland Green, the Chicago butcher. This skinny guy killed 37 people on the East Coast. His methods of killing are 100 times more brutal than the infamous Manson family. He's on the wrong plane." At the same time in the prison, inspectors discovered the secret in the document. The inspector suddenly noticed that on a Last Supper card, the characters all had their eyes cut out in square shapes. The inspector picked it up for a closer look. The eye holes were just the right size for letters. After comparing, he found the name of a city, Carson City. The inspector suddenly realized that the plane going to Carson City surely had a problem, so he rushed to report it. But the other officer stayed behind to continue checking. The 6 prisoners struggled incessantly. The guards in Carson City showed them no mercy, and a rifle but strike shattered the audio tape on the beaten prisoner. Finally, the guards realized the problem. To avoid raising suspicion, they let the prison van drive ahead and then called the police. But unfortunately, it was still one step too late. Before a large number of police cars arrived, the plane was preparing to take off. As for Pinball, who was in charge of the transponder, just because he lingered to chat with a girl for a few extra sentences, he missed his flight to freedom. He chased after it to the plane's window. The person he met again was the prisoner he had released. The prisoner smiled, and Pinball gave a thumbs up. The plane headed towards freedom, and the criminals began to celebrate wildly. The head of the DEA furiously rushed over. The undercover officer he had sent had died. The original plan was to approach the drug lord's son and then extract information, but unfortunately, he met with an accident. He had a big argument with the inspector for not allowing his men to carry guns onto the plane. But it was all just angry words. The dead cannot be brought back to life. Green was the star among the prisoners. Everyone respected and feared him. Cyrus suggested releasing him. Nathan opened the cage door and cautiously approached Green. He was a prisoner who instilled fear even in other bad guys. Cameron came to the cockpit as a loyal prisoner. He wanted to know the next plan. At this moment, the agents made contact with the plane. They could be sure that Cyrus had control of the entire plane, but they didn't get any clues. Seeing the officer so panicked that he lost control, Cyrus told Cameron that they would go to Lerner Airfield. There, within a mile, there was no sign of police. His wife and daughter were still waiting, but were approached by federal agents. They asked his wife to come to the airport because Cameron had slipped the recorder onto the guard, and the agents determined that he was trying to save people. He was a former U.S. Special Forces soldier and had received a Medal of Honor, was imprisoned for manslaughter while protecting his wife, and was now on temporary release to return home. And furthermore, he had the opportunity to get off the plane but chose to stay. The agents considered Cameron their ally. Combat helicopters arrived. The head of the DEA prepared to pursue the plane and directly destroy it. Nathan called Cameron and led him to check the wheels. Cameron was a little worried because Nathan had been acting unpleasantly towards him the whole way. Upon reaching the lower compartment of the plane, they saw a familiar face. It turned out Pinball had gotten on the plane, only he was hanging there. Nathan told Cameron to drop Pinball. Finally, he found an opportunity. Below was a city, and he quickly pulled out a pen and wrote on Federal Agent Larkin's shirt. Very quickly, Pinball fell freely. Meanwhile, in the city, an old man on a date had his car splattered with bird droppings. Every time I wash and polish my car, bird droppings fall. Perhaps it's a symbol of good luck. At that moment, Pinball fell. Agent Vince Larkin, investigating Cameron with Chris, received a call from the Fresno Police Department. A body fell from the sky, with an agent's name written on him. Now it was certain that Cameron was an ally. He quickly informed the head of the DEA, but how could they believe it? They thought they were about to catch the plane, completely underestimating Cyrus's intelligence. Due to the urgency, the agent both called the police and kept an eye on the director's sports car. To quickly get to Lerner Airfield, driving was not a bad option. William discovered the problem. He saw Cameron's parole certificate. The two confronted each other in the cargo hold. William was a ruthless man. How could he go easy on a petty manslaughterer? But he underestimated Cameron. After a fatal kick, the combat helicopter caught up to the plane, intending to strike immediately. But then they discovered a problem. Inside the plane was not 30 criminals, but a tourist plane carrying elderly people. Cameron returned to his seat. Green asked, "Two people got off, but one got on." "Not my fault," Cameron replied. "You don't need to explain. Most killers don't kill for bad motives, but true serial killers, they kill for pleasure. I'm different from them and different from you too. A sports car is indeed a sports car." The agent arrived at the airfield first. This place seemed uninhabited. Within a few miles, there wasn't even a soul. He hid his car in a house and then found a high vantage point to observe. But unfortunately, the observatory staff member was dead. It seemed something had happened at the airfield. Soon, the plane slowly landed at the airfield, nearly colliding with another small plane. The agile pilot quickly jumped off the plane, fortunately escaping death. The plane skidded off the runway, passed numerous obstacles, and finally came to a safe stop. And just like that, a bunch of prison stars got off the plane. Here, the drug lord would exchange them for another plane, only it hadn't arrived yet. The pilot of the small plane was also short-tempered. He originally intended to teach the big plane a lesson, but realizing something was wrong, he immediately ran back. Nathan intended to execute the hostage, but was stopped by Cameron. He argued that they couldn't kill the hostage before the plane arrived. Nathan was unhappy, but the boss gave the order, and he thought Cameron made sense. Everyone was busy with their own tasks. Green took another path, and no one dared to control him. He went into a house and saw a little girl playing with toys. Cameron went to find tools, running to a warehouse, but immediately after, he was hit from behind by someone. Johnny, observing from the observatory, suddenly noticed dust billowing in the distance. A convoy was heading towards the airfield. Based on the distance, he determined they would arrive in about 10 minutes. The killer held the doll and sat opposite the little girl. The little girl smiled and shared her toy with him. Meanwhile, on the other side, Cameron was restrained by 3 people. He finally understood their intention. The drug lord had no intention of taking everyone. He planned to abandon the criminals here, only taking his precious son. Just when he thought his life would end here, the agent appeared. His moves were deadly, his actions neat and decisive. Finally, he met the agent. But to save his friend, Cameron prepared to return to the plane. "I've seen your file. You're not a bad guy. You're just terribly unlucky. I've talked to your wife, directly, and your little daughter too. You've met Trisha? If I die, I don't think my daughter will understand. If you have a chance to talk to my wife again, tell her I love her. She's my little nightingale. But I can't abandon my friends." His departing back looked so cool. The agent breathed a sigh of relief. The criminals sped up because the police had arrived. Everyone was busy, but I was more worried about the little girl. "Are you sick, mister?" "Why do you ask? You look sick. You really are sick." The drug lord's son took the opportunity to sneak onto a private jet. Cyrus gritted his teeth in anger, but just as he was about to leave, the agent lowered the toll barrier. "You want to leave without paying? The barrier will bear the consequences." He was supposed to gain freedom, but unfortunately fell into the tiger's den. Seeing the drug lord's son deceiving everyone, Cyrus took a cigarette. Dare to deceive Cyrus, and this is your fate. Returning to the plane's cargo hold, Cyrus saw William's body, then he searched for weapons. A major battle was about to erupt. After setting up the action plan, these mad dogs began to attack. After hearing the alarm, Green and the little girl disappeared. The criminals attacked first, detonating the prepared gas canisters, delivering a fatal blow to the police. But Johnny did not participate in the fight. There were more important things. He couldn't stand it for another minute. Outside, guns fired and bullets flew like rain. And Cameron was clinging to the plane, preventing the criminals from escaping. Just as Johnny was about to achieve his goal, Cameron said, "Don't treat women like that." The criminals successfully defended themselves, preparing to retreat immediately. Combat helicopters arrived. Everything seemed too late. The plane sped off in a hail of bullets. A rope somehow got caught on a rock. The criminals fired continuously, shattering the rock. But the grappling hook flew into the cabin door, and after being pulled up a bit, it just happened to hook onto the sports car the agent drove. And so, a horrific scene occurred. The DEA couldn't stop the plane. The director then saw a sports car exactly like his own taking off with the plane. This sight wasn't common. The plane flew past the observatory, soaring upwards. The sports car crashed into the observatory and spun off. Then the car fell and shattered on the ground. The license plate was clearly visible. It was the DEA director's beloved car. The plane flew into the distance. This was the little girl we were worried about. She met a familiar face again. Cameron's secret was discovered. The boss was furious after seeing it. Not only was he deceived by the drug lord, but there was also a traitor on this sky prison. Cyrus lifted the female guard. Just as Cameron stood up, his fellow prisoner also stood up, saying it was all his doing. Then he was shot dead by Cyrus. Cyrus read the letter aloud. He knew the traitor was Cameron. At that moment, fighter jets arrived. The furious DEA police opened fire. No matter how much the agent yelled, the plane was riddled with holes. But this man remained very calm. Only he seemed unrelated to the situation. Cameron began fighting from the tail of the plane to the front. To prevent missile launches, the agent used his plane to shield the director. While Cyrus was distracted, Cameron took the front of the plane, controlling the entire aircraft. Then he successfully connected and spoke to the fighter jets. After the exchange, the plane would land at Las Vegas Airport, but the engine was damaged, so all the criminals took their seats. Now, preserving their lives was most important. The plane didn't cooperate. It crashed into the giant guitar symbol of the casino. It couldn't reach the airport and had to make an emergency landing. After skidding through several streets, the plane's wings broke apart. It crashed into the lake in front of the casino. Cyrus found an opportunity. Before dying, he had to kill Cameron. But life is full of uncertainties. No one expected the plane to tear in half. After destroying most of the casino's property, it finally stopped. Police cars arrived one after another, and the criminals were surrounded. The last hostages were finally rescued. Cameron's fellow prisoner survived. Perhaps after performing such a service, he would have a chance for parole. But many criminals were missing. Cameron, who originally intended to see his wife and child, instead saw Cyrus's figure. Cameron and the agent began their pursuit. What followed was a thrilling chase. Cameron recklessly clung to an ambulance, and a motorcycle sped up, taking down Nathan. While fighting Cyrus, the agent found an opportunity to get into a car. Cameron stabbed Cyrus through the calf. After a few blows, he handcuffed Cyrus to a fire truck. The agent was also very cunning. He poured water into the cockpit, and the driver, unable to see the road clearly, lost control. The most miserable was Cyrus. He crashed into one public utility after another along the road. His handcuffs came loose and then got caught on electrical wires. Just as the fire truck was about to crash, Cameron jumped off. As for Cyrus, those things weren't enough to kill him. He was brought here by a conveyor belt, only to see a large block of iron above, about to crush him. Casino money flew everywhere in the lake out front. Cameron found the stuffed rabbit he intended to give his daughter. Everything finally ended. He shook hands with the agent. The police found Green's toy, but didn't know why it was on the plane. Cameron looked across the street and saw a familiar face. He slowly walked towards the wife he had longed for day and night, and the daughter he had never met. Cameron was also the father his daughter longed for day and night. The whole family happily hugged each other. In the hearts of his wife and child, Cameron was never a criminal, but a hero. The story ends happily. Today's story concludes here. Thank you for watching the film. What do you think of this film? Please comment below.